Afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce Kathleen Campbell Walker, a member and practice group chair of our immigration practice group from our El Paso, Texas office. Kathleen's going to tell us about this new era for qualified employers in completing Form I-9. Kathleen, I understand there's some new things going on. Why don't you tell us about that?
Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with everybody on August 1, which is basically the start date of our new world that we're dealing with in Form I-9 land. It's interesting that we've had just a major change starting today, and I wanted to try to walk you through the relevance of some of this in this short presentation. So first of all, for all employers, not just qualified employers, and we'll discuss what that means in a minute, for all employers, August 1 today marks a new day for use of a new Form I-9 for completion of employment eligibility and identity before you start work. And you also will use it for re-verification when applicable. So we have that. And then what else is going on? Well, they've announced a new permanent remote flexibility option for certain employers. So that means that while we had some experience with this during COVID-19, we have a more specific process that is only going to be available to e-verify employers in good standing. We'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, we know that for those Forms I-9 that we completed during the COVID flexibility period announced by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, what we've got going on there is we had an August 30, 2023 deadline to re-inspect the documents presented for Form I-9 completion by August 30. Now we're going to look at this interplay for certain qualified e-verify employers where they'll have the option of using the optional alternative remote reinspection alternative for this process. So let me try to get through it. And bottom line, this is the first day. I expect we're going to have some clarifications, but this will at least get us started. So moving on, just briefly, I mentioned we've got a new Form I-9. Okay, the new Form I-9 is effective for use as of August 1. And the new form without any kind of watermarks is available now on this link below on I-9 Central. That is a government website of USCIS. You can use the current version of Form I-9 that is the edition of October 21 of 2019 through October 31st. Once we hit November 1 this year, all employers are going to have to use the new Form I-9. And the new Form I-9 is, it's a scrunched into a one-page form, but we've added 2 additional pages. So it's really now a 4-page form with a supplement A for the preparer translator section from section 1 of the Form I-9 and a supplement B now instead of section 3 for re-verification and rehiring. And you'll see in a minute that we have this new fancy checkbox in the additional information section of section 2 of the Form I-9 if employers who are qualified utilize the optional alternative remote verification option to inspect documents. Okay, here we go. I don't know if you can see it too well, but it's on I-9 Central. But you'll see in the additional information section, section 2, now it's a one-page form, that this is the check the box to use if you use the alternative procedure to engage in remote verification, meaning review identity and work eligibility documents, basically over a video. Let's keep going about what this means. So we just finished talking about, this optional form. It's available for qualified e-verify employers, and it includes this checkbox that we discussed. Who really is going to qualify to utilize or make the selection of remote inspection going forward. This is a permanent flexibility alternative. Okay, so who qualifies? A, you got to be enrolled in E-Verify. B, the hiring sites that you use this optional alternative of remote inspection have to be enrolled pursuant to the Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Homeland Security for use of E-Verify. So it's in the MOU. And then we have to be an employer that's in good standing. Now, we have some concerns over how this is going to be interpreted. What if I hadn't been using E-Verify and my account was suspended? Well, that's probably not going to mean that you were in good standing. So stay alert on how this good standing requirement will be interpreted moving forward. It's time to contact your immigration counsel for some guidance. And finally, there will be a training requirement for new E-Verify employers and any users who are going to manage or create E-Verify cases for that E-Verify employer. You will attend the training virtually based on an E-Verify tutorial that's free, that's accessible online. And it provides some fraud training in order to be able to spot fraudulent documents, and in addition, how to utilize E-Verify. Okay, so next, what all is included as a requirement in this optional alternative inspection process if I, the employer, choose to use it? Remember that I don't have to use it. I can still do physical inspection of identity and work eligibility documents. And if the employee says, I don't want to use your optional alternative inspection, then the employer has to accommodate and do a physical inspection of the verification of employment and eligibility to work. Okay, so what's in the process? I'm going to examine the documents front and back that are sent to me in advance of a live video interview with the employee, presenting those same documents, flipping them over if they're two sides, for me to be able to see that they seem to match the employee presenting it. Then, if I'm utilizing the new Form I-9 available today, August 1, I'll have a box to check in the additional information section that I use this alternative inspection option. And then this alternative inspection option requires me to keep a copy, front and back, if applicable, of any documents presented and to retain them with the Form I-9. And of course, they have to be legible copies. You realize that, for E-Verify, I'm only required to keep certain copies of certain documents. This requirement is broader to be able to use the optional alternative inspection process. I still have to timely create my E-Verify case. And of course, if I'm audited, I have to make sure that I have clear and legible copies of the documents, front and back if applicable, for the auditor to review. If I'm not using the new Form I-9 and it doesn't have the box, then I have to actually annotate the additional information section regarding my use of this alternative procedure. Let's take a look at this, which is now posted on I-9 Central by USCIS. You can see here's the comparison using the new form as of August 1, 2023, how to deal with this selection of the alternative inspection procedure that's within the box, additional information, versus the old form, which I can continue to use through October 31 on how I make this annotation. And so if I've already done a Form I-9, of course, I'm typically going to be only utilizing this in the case of re-inspecting a COVID-19 based Form I-9 done, or if I'm doing re-verification, for example. Now, let me go to the next example. As you can see, this is more of a blow up of the new form showing you the box that you can check. And then What about all of us who've been worried about having to reinspect documents that were presented remotely during the COVID flexibilities that were announced? I have a deadline right now of August 30th. What am I supposed to do? And can I use this new procedure of alternative remote inspection to re-inspect these documents I'm supposed to do? Guess what? The answer is yes. But again, only for qualified employers. Who are they? Here we go again. An E-Verify employer in good standing who completed the Form I-9. And the hiring site where I utilized this remote COVID flexibility inspection was enrolled. I created an E-Verify case unless I'm solely using it for re-verification in Section 3. And I performed this remote inspection pursuant to these flexibility policies between March 20th of 2020 and July 31 of 2023. So realize that if you meet these requirements, then I have another alternative to utilize remote re-inspection to be able to meet this August 30 requirement for Forms I-9 completed using remote flexibility options. I know that's a lot, but that's what's going on. So I have a new hire alternative, and I have a alternative based on COVID flexibility before August 30 for remote inspection. This is an example of if I'm using the old form that an edition date in 2019 to do this update regarding re-inspection. This is just an example of a way to annotate what was done. Also, there's been a posting as of today regarding an example from the government, meaning USCIS, on this annotation, and you can see it on I-9 Central, and it's on the blog that we just posted today about this development. Okay, so my last bit of information today is about, well, what about enforcement concerning this re-inspection requirement before August 30th? And you can see that there is a posting that's at this link where Immigration and Customs Enforcement has said, if you fail to complete the physical document re-inspection, is what I'll call it, by August 30th, if you show you've taken timely steps, Immigration and Customs Enforcement will generally not focus its enforcement resources on that type of violation. Does that mean I get to blow it off? No. And in fact, right now, if I'm eligible as an employer and I have this remote re-inspection alternative, I think that the expectation is I'm going to utilize the options that I have available. So, of course, physical inspection is still allowed. You do not have to do the remote inspection option, but it's important to understand that I can't just apply this indiscriminately. Otherwise, I potentially am going to be exposed to a discrimination charge. I can apply the remote flexibility opportunity as to all hires. I can apply it only to all remote hires. But if I choose not to do it, then I can use the physical inspection option for all hires, including those that are hybrid hires. So we can discuss that further, but I just wanted to go ahead and get that information to you, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was amazing. We did have a few questions. I'm just going to run through them. And I know some of these you covered a little bit through your presentation, but I'm still going to, just for the benefit of the audience. So what are the main changes to Form I-9?
So the main changes are, remember that we typically had a Form I-9 that was 2 pages, and 1 page also had the list of acceptable documents. So this list of acceptable documents is now our 2nd page, and our 1st page is section 1 and 2 of the form scrunched together with this alternative inspection checkbox in the additional information section. My other 2 pages is basically what's happened is the re-verification section in section 3 has been put into a separate supplemental page. And in addition to that, we have a prepare a translator section that used to be in section 1 of the form that's now a separate supplement A.
So this form is going to need to be reviewed by those that were familiar with it in its previous form.
No, it's definitely, there is a definitely a new approach, but I have to tell you that once upon a time, way back when all of this started out in the mid 80s, we just had a 1-page form. So we're back to the future, basically.
Good. Okay. Good point. What employers may choose to use this optional alternative inspection option for new hires, and at what locations? I think you did cover that in your presentation.
Yeah, but let me go back, because I think that this gets a little complicated because I have to bifurcate between August 1 going forward, new hires, and I might become an E-Verify employer in the future, which would allow me to consider this optional remote alternative going forward. Then I have a different issue of E-Verify employers that previously completed the Form I-9 during COVID flexibilities, who are now faced with this physical reinspection of the documents that were received and reviewed remotely. Now I'm basically applying a reinspection process to be able to meet that obligation for the Form I-9 an E-Verify employer previously completed in that window of time of COVID flexibilities I mentioned.
Wow, that is complicated. What if an employee demands that the employer use the normal physical inspection process of their documents presented for Form I-9 completion?
Guess what? You as an employer are going to have to accommodate.
Wow, yeah. May a qualified employer offer this alternative procedure to only some employees?
It's a trick question. I mean, bottom line, I have to not be discriminatory. I can elect to apply this new procedure only to all remote hires. Otherwise, in that circumstance, if I only apply it to remote hires, the alternative procedure, then I'm going to use physical inspection for hybrid employees and for those employees who do not work remotely at all.
Wow, this is a complicated process. Let's see, what else? What employers qualify to use this new optional alternative process to inspect documents remotely, again, to update Form I-9 completed during the temporary COVID Form I-9 policies?
It's hard to even get that question out. So now we're dealing with, this is a Form I-9. It's usually the 2019 version. It could be an earlier version depending upon when the thing was completed, but we're talking about Forms I-9 that were completed during COVID flexibilities. So that's going to be the 2019 version of the form. If I follow the Immigration and Customs Enforcement guidance that was issued during the COVID flexibility period, and I completed the Form I-9 remotely, meaning that, I might have had somebody fax me in the document. I might have had somebody be on a Zoom call with me. There are a variety of different alternatives that I could have done as an employer on this remote verification. So I'm going to have a 2019 form. I'm going to need to re-inspect right now by August 30th those documents on identity and work eligibility by August 30th. I'm supposed to have the person come in and physically inspect, or I designate a third party on my behalf as the employer to physically inspect and do the update on the additional information section about the fact that I've re-inspected these documents. Okay. What this means is that in this window between August 1 with the new forms announcement and August 30th, my old COVID flexibility deadline, I'm going to have the opportunity to re-inspect using the announced optional alternative procedure. I don't get to apply any old procedure I wish. I have to follow the one we discussed during our presentation. So I have to receive the documents in advance. And then I'm going to have a live video interaction. I'm going to make copies front and back as applicable of the documents presented. I'm going to annotate the additional information section. And I provided one example during our presentation about the fact that I've done this timely. And if I do this, then I'm hoping not to be later on subject to penalties for failure to properly complete the Form I-9.
So I think the real takeaway from this is that we should call Immigration Council to work through all of these timelines and forms and inspections.
Well, I think we're going to be useful in this circumstance, but certainly take a look at I-9 Central as USCIS is going to continue to roll out guidance. We have some concerns on, what's going to boot out an employer who's an E-Verify employer who will not be considered in good standing to be able to use this option. We have some concerns about, well, wait a minute, during COVID flexibilities, and if I go ahead and take this opportunity to remotely inspect and I qualify, what if I had done exactly what the requirements are now stated for this optional inspection process during my COVID flexibility period? Do I really have to re-inspect? And that's open for, question right now. We have a number of unknowns, but this is what sort of a summary of what we've got right now. But it's a great development in light of our new remote workforce. It seems to ever be increasing, even though some employers want people to get back in the office. I think remote work site situations will obviously continue, and this will hopefully help us. And I imagine E-Verify is going to become more attractive for employers to potentially enroll in it going forward, to take the opportunity given.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. That is all the questions we have for today. Kathleen, I want to thank you so much for your great information, a great presentation. There is a link to the CIS.gov I-9 Central for the audience to download. A copy of the slide deck is out there as well. And there's also a link to Dickinson Wright's immigration blog. I encourage everyone to take a look at that. And thank you again, Kathleen, and we'll see you next time.
Really appreciate the time. Thank you. Good luck.